Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, Cortland Sutton, Raheem Mostert, Devontae Adams, Tevin Coleman, Cam Akers, Paris Campbell, Brashard Perriman, Jimmy Garoppolo, Sterling Shepard, Drew Lock. If you had one of those players on your team, you may feel like your season is over. But let me tell you, there is hope. Fantasy football comes with all sorts of ups and downs, but tonight, we hope to push your team in the right direction. Every injury opens an opportunity, and the waiver wire, especially after this hectic week, can be your best friend. But who are you going to go after? Who are you going to trade away? Who will you hold on to? We answer those questions and more on the Last Minute Fantasy Scramble. You got questions? We got answers. The Last Minute Fantasy Scramble starts in 10,
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome to the Last Minute Fantasy Scramble. My name is Kevin McCartney, and I am one of your hosts for tonight. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for putting up with our technical delays that caused us to start a little bit later. Today is our first show. We're really excited to be with you tonight, and we got a waiver wire edition tonight. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce our first co-host I'm going to be bringing up. This guy has been in the same fantasy league with me for about 11, 12 years now. We've faced each other in the championship the last 2 years, and he knows a little bit about fantasy football. The current champion of my league, Bobby Digital Janas. Bobby, how you doing tonight?
I'm good, K-Mac. I'm excited to be on here as well. And joining us here is also my former co-worker, and I was in a fantasy league with him as well. Fantasy expert, fantasy guru,
Bobby,
John Viveros, or Johnny 5. John, what's going on, man?
Bobby, sorry.
Hey.
Oh, sorry to cut you off, Bobby. You are sounding a little off. Just going to ask you to go back to how your audio was before. But yeah, Johnny 5, how's it going?
Going well. Glad to be here. I was like super excited when Bobby D told me about this podcast you guys were brewing up, and I was like, oh, yeah, we talked about this last year, starting up one, and I'm glad to finally actually do it.
Nice. Well, glad to have you on board. So let's start by talking about this crazy week too. I mean, there's a lot to go into, especially with all these injuries that happened. So many possible waiver wire pickups. But I want to get started on a little recap of this Monday Night Football game. And especially, John, I want to ask you specifically about the Raiders side of things. What takeaways do you have from how these Raider players performed?
It was honestly, like, outside of Derek Carr, like it was pretty much what you expected from the Raiders. Like, you got a lot of Darren Waller, the baller. I mean, he saw 12 receptions, 1 touchdown, over 100 yards. He had like 14, 15 targets. He was almost half the target share. Jacobs, he's a stud, absolutely crushing it. Over 100 yards again. Derek Carr, though, finding a way to 3 touchdowns, just shy of 300 yards. But the big thing, he's not turning over the ball. I was really, really impressed with how he performed. And another thing like that caught my eye too was the defense. Picked off Drew Brees once, and they contained him. I know this is obviously like you're without Michael Thomas, who's a huge bulk of that offense, but like that defense performed. That, like, Las Vegas is a pretty serious looking team right now. Not gonna lie, good to be 2-0.
Yeah, they're off to a great start. Great way to open up the new stadium despite having no fans in attendance. But, I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better start against a solid Saints team. Now, speaking of that Saints team, Bobby, if you are with us, why don't you take us through your takeaways from that Saints squad last night?
Yeah, I mean, with the Saints, it was a little bit more of a surprise. I mean, John just talked about the Raiders and how good they looked and how maybe even a little bit of a surprise they were. But, I mean, besides Alvin Kamara scoring 38.4 PPR points, the same old 13 carries, 79 yards, 2 touchdowns, 9 receptions out of the 9 targets he got for 95 yards. They came out a little flat in this one. I don't know if they were overconfident. I don't know if they were really feeling the effects of Michael Thomas's injury. Drew Brees threw an interception in the third quarter that just looked like his arm gave out on him. I mean, it was something right to the middle of the field, right to the middle linebacker. He didn't even see him. It just looked like something so uncharacteristic of Drew Brees, somebody that we've come to know as such a great quarterback over the years. The Saints struggled. We thought this was going to be the Saints were going to be in control of this one. We thought maybe they'd go run heavy, more Latavius Murray. After all, Murray got 15 carries last game, but the Raiders took the lead after the Saints jumped out to a 10-0 lead. But then the Raiders jumped out to a lead, and they never let it go. And the Saints were in comeback mode the rest of the game. In terms of fantasy football, Breeze, again, nothing super spectacular. He did go over 300 yards, but he did throw that interception, only 1 touchdown. Again, Murray only 3 carries after coming off a 15-carry game the previous week. Jared Cook only had 2 catches. One of them was a touchdown, but he's very quiet. Emmanuel Sanders, we thought was going to come in and really fill the void for Michael Thomas. Emmanuel Sanders was non-existent throughout the whole game. The one surprise I will say is Traquan Smith. 5 receptions out of the 7 targets he got for 86 yards. Maybe he's the guy to own in New Orleans with Michael Thomas out. I don't know, but it was definitely a letdown for the Saints, and they have the Packers coming into town next week on Sunday Night Football, so they'd better get their act together real quick.
Yeah, there is a lot of questions that came out of that game. Like, is Drew Brees a consistent fantasy starter that you could depend on going forward? He's been great his entire career, especially for fantasy. But he's gotten to that age, and especially without having his number 1 receiver in there, that you're not really sure if you could depend on him. I know I will tell you, though, as a Kamara owner, I was very happy with his performance last night. Helped get me the win in a couple leagues. But enough on that. I do want to move on because, like I've already mentioned, this was a crazy week 2, and the waiver wire is going to be huge. Now, so many injuries. A lot of people's top picks are out. Saquon Barkley, especially for the year. Christian McCaffrey, he might be gone for a month and a half. So, I want to ask you, let's start with Bobby. I want to get your takes on the Giants running back situation. That we did have news just now, actually, that Devonta Freeman is signing that deal with the Giants. How does that affect the Giants' backfield, and do you think that he is the waiver wire running back to pick?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you, K-Mac. I'm not super excited about any of these Giants running backs, especially considering the fact now that you do see the news that they brought in Devonta Freeman. Wayne Gallman did replace Saquon Barkley and fill in for him a few games, but he wasn't anything spectacular. They brought Dion Lewis aboard, who was in New England back a few years back, and he was a stud for the Patriots, but then he went to Tennessee, and he's been getting older, and he hasn't really been the same. And them bringing in Devonta Freeman in the first place kind of shows that they're not willing to give Lewis or Gallman the feature load. So Freeman's going to come in now, and he's going to I would assume that he probably is going to be worked into the mix. He's just going to start slow, I would think, and then maybe over time he'll gain more of the touches in the backfield. But that offensive line is horrible. I mean, that offense is nothing to be excited about in the first place. And that offensive line, we saw how bad it was week 1 when they played Pittsburgh. Now, granted, Pittsburgh has a good defense, but Saquon Barkley couldn't even get past the line of scrimmage on more than half of his carries. And Saquon Barkley is obviously one of the best running backs in the NFL. So their offensive line isn't very good, and that's not something that excites me about this. It's looking definitely like a committee. It has committee written all over it. We all know committees aren't something that we like in fantasy football. So I'm not very excited either about any of those 3, and I don't think any of them are the waiver pick to grab, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I feel that that line just isn't very good. Saquon Barkley being that top tier talent, now he's out, and now you're splitting it between 3 guys. One of the guys just fresh off like free agency. I'm not happy with either of them. Saquon Barkley couldn't do that well. Devonta Freeman might be worth a pick, but there's definitely other guys you should look at first. Which, speaking of that, one of the guys that a lot of people are looking heavily into is going to be Christian McCaffrey's replacement in Carolina, Mike Davis. John, what do you think about Mike Davis and that entire Carolina backfield situation?
Yeah, it's probably pretty more fluid than anything else, I would say, because Mike Davis definitely, he's the hot hand after this week. They're the hot pickup because McCaffrey got hurt very, very late. Mike Davis has always kind of been that that feast or famine. Are you going to get a touchdown? What are you going to get out of it? But at the end of the day, like even with any handcuffed, any replacement, very, very rarely are you going to get the same productivity out of your first round pick. Like Christian McCaffrey, that's a set and forget 25 every game. Like And very, very rarely are you even going to get anything close to that from a replacement. Like, handcuffs are always great in certain situations, like in Kansas City, in Baltimore. Like, those, I could run behind those lines and score 20 points in fantasy. But for a team like Carolina, who's really not that great, like, that's going to be a tough one. But I would say, like, out of the ones available, like, for filling in for an injury, he's probably the best one. You don't want anything with that Giant situation. The San Francisco situation is another really interesting one because that's just a good football team. But Mike Davis probably has the best potential, but I think it might be more of a stash than anything else.
Yeah, that's very true. And the thing about Christian McCaffrey, he has had one of the highest usage rates in the entire NFL out of any position, let alone a running back, over the last 3 years. And the fact that he's managed to get so far in his career without being injured already is just astounding. And the way that they push him, the way that they load him, like, it's a wonder he's made it so far without being hurt. That being said, those are some big shoes to fill. Whether Mike Davis could get it done, we're going to wait and see, but he's definitely a safe bet to try to pick, especially if you have one of those top waiver picks. So I want to go on to the rest of these running backs. There's several others that are definitely worth taking a look at. A lot are still open on a lot of leagues. And Bobby, what other running backs do you think are worth taking a look at here?
Well, John mentioned the San Francisco 49ers backfield and how that's been shaken up now with Raheem Mostert having the MCL sprain. He's most likely going to miss this week and possibly beyond. Coach Kyle Shanahan said that, as well as Tevin Coleman having a multi-week injury. So a name that a lot of people now are looking at is Jerick McKinnon. McKinnon, if some people don't remember, Jerick McKinnon came on in 2018. They signed him to a 4-year, $30 million contract, and that's no chump change. I mean, before his injuries, McKinnon was a highly rated athlete. He was more than capable of catching the ball. He's only 5'9", so maybe not capable of handling a full workload, but he was very productive in Minnesota, and he seemed to fit Kyle Shanahan's system perfectly, which is why he would offer him that contract. Unfortunately, the last 2 seasons, he hasn't even played because of 2 knee injuries. And in the limited time he's gotten in week 1 against Arizona and week 2 last week against the Jets, he's looked pretty impressive. We know he's going to catch the ball, so he's got a lot of value in PPR leagues. And McKinnon is somebody I think who has some upside, who you could take a swing on. Now, keep in mind that they will use their other running back, Jeff Wilson, and he may garner some goal line touches. But, I mean, with the 49ers right now, Kittle's banged up. The receivers are banged up. Garoppolo's not playing. So they have Nick Mullins. But Kyle Shanahan's one of the smartest coaches there is. And I think he'd find a way to get his high upside guys the ball, just like Jerick McKinnon. I think he has one of the highest upsides this week out of those guys. So one of the other guys I would look at is Jerick McKinnon.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely with that beaten up San Francisco backfield, he is going to be the lone star back there. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what he does. Now, John, did you have anybody else you were keeping an eye on? I know there's still a few other big names out there in a lot of leagues.
Yeah, one that he's definitely bitten me so many times, and it just seems like he's so feast or famine. It's going to be Sony Michel, honestly. Like, just he seems like he just either does really well or he doesn't do anything. It is a tough matchup this week against the Raiders, but it's just so he's just so very inefficient. But it's just he's always one I look out for. He's just so skilled. I just think he might just be in a wrong situation. And then another one that it's not a sexy name or anything, but it's one to definitely keep an eye on is Myles Gaskin. He's only owned in like 20% of leagues, and that's even more recent because most people who had their waiver claims go today instead of tomorrow. He seems to be the fancy pick in the 3-headed monster that is the Miami Dolphins offense, at least from the running back situation. Again, like, Jacksonville it's a sneaky good matchup this week too. Jacksonville they got absolutely shredded by Hines, and then this past weekend by, again, Tennessee's pretty solid, but so that's definitely one to look out for. I feel it's a three-man race there with Breida and Jordan Howard, but Gaskin has been the one that's getting the looks. Definitely one to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, definitely. And both of those backfields that you mentioned, both in the AFC East, there's a lot of question marks on both of those teams. And to me, I personally don't feel comfortable starting anyone in those positions. But Sony Michel definitely feels like he's got with the most talent in that Patriots backfield. And he might be worth a grab because you never know when he could pop off, and especially if you need those points, he can be that guy. But you have a crowded backfield back there, and you have Cam Newton running the ball as well. So especially on the goal line, you always got to look out for Cam Newton. As far as the Dolphins situation goes, yeah, there's definitely 3 guys back there, but just that usage rate, yeah, he has been the hot hand lately, but they brought in 2 guys over the offseason, and it's going to be strange if you don't see them getting the ball a lot moving forward.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Like I said, it just seems he's been the one that's been producing. So that's like I said, like I wouldn't start him this week. I wouldn't start. I honestly wouldn't start him for the next couple of weeks. But he's definitely the one. He's definitely a stash, 100%. Like I wouldn't. I don't know if I'd waste a claim on him, but if you wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and see he's available, I say stash him and forget. Hope he results into something.
Absolutely, Bobby. Any other thoughts you have on these running backs?
I did. I have 2 more guys. One guy who should be owned in more than 50% of leagues. So if he's available right now, I would definitely put in a waiver claim for him over any of the guys we're talking about. Is Chargers running back Josh Kelly. This guy's a rookie coming out of UCLA, and last week, when week 1 against the Bengals, he had 12 carries for 60 yards and a touchdown. That's 5 yard per carry average, and they like what they're seeing out of him. So much so that last week he got 25 touches, 23 carries, 64 yards, 2 catches, 49 yards. He has all their red zone carries instead of Austin Eckler. So Josh Kelly clearly is part of their game plan, and the Chargers do have a good defense, so that a lot of games will not get out of hand, and positive game script will favor the running backs. So Josh Kelly is somebody that I would definitely grab as a guy who can be potentially standalone value, maybe bye-week fill-in in deeper leagues, but also has upside for a lot more if something were to happen to Austin Eckler. But then somebody else, another name that's been thrown around this week on the waiver wire is Rams running back Darrell Henderson. Again, the Rams, Sean McVay came into the season wanting to have a committee. Todd Gurley's not there anymore. He's kind of taking a page out of Kyle Shanahan's book, wanting to have a committee of running backs, and they drafted Cam Akers out of Florida State. They have Malcolm Brown and Henderson returning. Henderson showed flashes last year, and Brown had a good game against against the Cowboys in week 1. But then he comes into this game and messes his pinky up. He had surgery on it actually on Monday, and then Cam Akers has a rib injury, so he was banged up in that game as well. Henderson came in at 12 carries for 81 yards and a touchdown. So he definitely has a lot of explosion. That's one of his key features, and they like him a lot, of course. Akers' injury isn't necessarily serious. It's a pain tolerance thing. So he may play, and Malcolm Brown is expected to play despite having surgery on his pinky. But you've got to think that Henderson will be in the mix as well. So again, it's a committee. It's ugly, but Darrell Henderson can be a guy you can pick up. Maybe you can use if the matchup's right, or maybe if one of those guys are injured and not playing, they may give Henderson another crack at it, and he is a home run threat out of those 3.
So speaking of that, what do you say to these Malcolm Brown owners who go and make a grab for him after his amazing week 1 performance, only to see this lackluster performance in week 2, partially due to the fact that he did get injured? But what would you say to them? Is he worth holding on to? Is he worth trying to move?
Oh, well, I would say he's worth holding on to for right now. I mean, you could always use depth, especially in deeper leagues, and he is still capable of getting 15 to 20 touches. But I don't know if he has much trade value right now. I don't know if somebody would be interested in him, but if you can trade him for a guy maybe like a Devin Singletary who has a higher command of that backfield and who may have a better opportunity for touches, then by all means do it. But for now, I just hold Malcolm Brown because he's too valuable to drop right now. But again, it's not the best of situations currently.
No, it isn't. Now, bringing it back over to John, out of all the guys we've mentioned so far, if you were to pick a top 3, saying that all of these guys are available, 1, 2, and 3, who would you go for?
Well, Kelly number 1. But again, like he's not. I don't think he's available in any of my leagues. Even in my 10-team league, he's not available. 100% Kelly 1. Then I would go Henderson. Actually, you know what? I'd go McKinnon 2, just because easy matchup against the Giants. That team is awful, and you just don't know. Like Mostert, multi-week injury, and same thing with Tevin Coleman too. Like, not really sure what's going to happen. He's doubtful this week, but could be. He could be hot. You just don't know. Like, doubtful could be anywhere from he's going to get a couple carries, he's going to just not play at all. And then I go Henderson 3. Like Bobby said, Henderson, huge home run threat. He crushed it this past week. I mean, 5.8 yards per carry on 15 carries, or that's for the season. Sorry, 6.8 yards per carry against Philly. And Philly's no slouch against the run. Their weakness is definitely in the secondary, and he definitely kind of torched them.
Some good points. Now, Bobby, I'm asking you the same question. Who would your top 3 be?
Yeah, well, I'm definitely in agreement with John about Josh Kelly, although he may not be available in most leagues anyway. And then number 2, I would go with Mike Davis, especially if you're a Christian McCaffrey owner, because Christian McCaffrey is going to be sidelined 4 to 6 weeks, and Mike Davis is the clear starter. I mean, he emerged as the clear backup in camp. Matt Rule talked him up as a dual threat, and we know he's a dual threat guy. He had 8 receptions for 74 yards last week against the Bucs when McCaffrey went out, especially in PPR leagues. That's really valuable. And we know Teddy Bridgewater is more of a dink and dunk type of quarterback. He's going to look for checkdowns. I mean, we know how much Christian McCaffrey got as well. So I would say Mike Davis at 2, and then at 3, I would say Jerick McKinnon. I just love his upside. I love that team, the way they use their running backs, and Kyle Shanahan, again, with that contract in 2018, obviously loves him as well. But again, I also think that those rankings are subject to your specific team and your needs. I mean, if you are somebody who maybe you are 2-0 but you lost Christian McCaffrey, then Mike Davis is your clear number 1 because he's going to fill in perfectly for you until McCaffrey comes back. But if you're somebody that maybe lost Saquon or you're 0-2 and you just need a home run hitter, then maybe you might want to go with a guy like Henderson, like John was talking about, or Jerick McKinnon.
That's some good points. But enough about running backs already. We all know that those are the big pickups for this week. But there are some good wide receiver picks out there. John, who do you like over at the wide receiver position for this week?
So wide receiver, it's definitely wide receiver is so deep that there's definitely a lot of people open. Interesting one to look for is it's definitely Russell Gage coming off a pretty solid showing against Dallas. Again, he's the clear 3rd, maybe even 4th option behind Hayden Hurst. But he had 9 targets against Dallas. Like, that's insane. Like, I think he out-targeted Julio Jones, of all things. Came out with 16 points behind that offense. He's definitely solid work. And then Keelan Cole, too, himself. 6 receptions, 1 touchdown, 7 targets as well. He's had back-to-back 15-plus point games. And going against Miami, Cincinnati, Houston are his next 3. That's a sneaky good play as well.
Yeah, for sure. And Miami dealing with some injury issues of their own, especially in that secondary. Now, Bobby, who do you like over at the wide receiver position?
Well, first of all, I definitely 100% agree with John about Russell Gage. I mean, he's definitely up there. And even going back to last year, once the Falcons traded Mohamed Sanu since week 8, Russell Gage was averaging almost 8 targets a game then. And it seemed to be carrying over through this season. But a guy I'm looking at is N'Keal Harry. People forget he was a first-round pick in 2019, but he got 12 targets last week from Cam Newton. And he has 18 targets so far on the season, so that's about 9 per game. But I mean, the Patriots, Cam Newton, it's obviously a run-heavy attack right now, but they're still looking for someone has to catch the ball when he does throw. Now I know they have Julian Edelman there, but N'Keal Harry could be a vertical threat for them. And Cam Newton, I think, really trusts him and is starting to build a relationship with him. When Harry fumbled against the Dolphins, he had a catch and he fumbled it into the end zone, and it went into the back of the end zone. It was called a touchback. Cam Newton came out and defended him, and that I think that's a big deal when it comes to their chemistry. So I definitely like N'Keal Harry. He's also 12th in the NFL among receivers so far in total targets. And then another, like John said, it's so deep. We could, pick a number of guys. Another guy I'm looking at potentially for a flyer is Michael Pittman Jr. From the Indianapolis Colts. They had Paris Campbell slotted in as their number 2 wideout, but unfortunately he's having more injury problems. He was carted off the field. They said he's out indefinitely. Pittman was their 2nd round pick in this year's draft, and he's been developing rapport with Phil Rivers in pre-practice and camp leading up to it, and he did receive 6 targets last week once Campbell went out. T.Y. Hilton's been really struggling. I don't know if it's an injury. I don't know if it's his chemistry with Rivers. Maybe he's just starting to lose a step. And Pittman's also 6'5". I mean, he's their tallest receiver on the team right now currently. And, Rivers likes those big guys. I mean, you look what he used to do with Vincent Jackson back when in his San Diego days, and then he had Mike Williams last year in the last few years. So if you're looking for a flyer, if you're maybe in a deep league and you maybe want to find a bench stash, maybe take a look at Michael Pittman.
Yeah, for sure. And let's talk about quarterbacks. So the quarterback position is pretty deep this year, and there's plenty of guys that you could go and stream right into the lineup. John, who do you like over at the quarterback position?
I think an interesting one definitely is Ryan Tannehill. Obviously, obvious one, 4 touchdowns against a very bad Jacksonville team, and he's going against another very, very I don't want to say bad, underperforming Minnesota team. But one that I'm definitely looking out for is definitely going to be Justin Herbert, to be honest. I mean, he absolutely torched the Chiefs, and that's with an interception. One on the ground, one in the air. He completed 66% of his passes, and to be honest, they should have won that game. Like, the Chiefs had no business winning that game. 2 58-yard bombs by Harrison Butker. Justin Herbert, he might be the best quarterback prospect in the from that draft, and that's including Joe Burrow and Tua, who we still haven't seen yet. But I again, like, quarterback's not really something that I look for, because I take my one quarterback and I go with it, and then I'll fill when I need one. But Herbert is definitely someone that has me interested a little bit, especially for a rookie.
Yeah, definitely not a bad pickup. And with the surprise of him starting almost last minute in Sunday's game, it's definitely interesting to see what he could do. Now, Bobby, who do you have?
Well, I love the call on Herbert. I mean, I think in most leagues, at least the leagues I'm in, Joe Burrow is most likely rostered. But if Joe Burrow is available in your league, I would definitely use him as my first choice. Whether you're somebody who streams QBs, or maybe you're looking for a high upside backup, or somebody who can replace you on the bye weeks. Joe Burrow also provides that rushing ability as well. And even though that line isn't very good, I mean, he threw the ball 61 times, and he's a gamer. I mean, he's so calm and confident in the pocket. And they're just going to he's just going to have to keep throwing. But somebody else too, I mean, from last year even, we love Gardner Minshew. I mean, he has the 11th most fantasy points through quarterbacks so far this year. He gets a matchup against the Dolphins. If you're looking for someone this week who had their top cornerback, Byron Jones, most likely is not going to play. And he's just been so efficient, but he did throw for 339 yards last week and 3 touchdowns against the Titans, and he does add sprinkles in a little bit of rushing upside. Maybe he'll sneak in for a touchdown or 2 over the season. But Gardner Minshew, again, is somebody that I like as well, especially if you're looking for a QB streamer for this week.
Oh, yeah, he could definitely do some damage against that Dolphins defense. And both of those rookie quarterbacks mentioned, like, there's a ton of upside, especially when going with a rookie. Yeah, it's worth having on your team if you have the roster space, because if they start to gain momentum and blow up midway through the season, then you're going to be happy that you have them on your bench. So shifting over to the tight ends, John, who do you like here?
I have the banger of the week, and I guarantee you won't know who it is.
The banger of the week. Let's hear it.
All right, the banger of the week. Drew Sample. All right? This guy is... I don't want to say he's like the next coming of Jesus or anything, but this man got 9 targets against Cleveland yesterday in relief, because CJ Uzoma, he tore his ACL, right? It was ACL or was it Achilles? It was one or the other. And who was actually, he was killing it too, though. Like before, like he had, I think, like 4 receptions or something before he went down on 6 targets, and he had 4 for 5 against LA the week before. But it is Drew Sample. He isn't even known really for his pass catching. Second year guy. I honestly couldn't even tell you where he went to school. But he's rostered in 0.2% of leagues. Yeah. So like he is 1,000. If he's not available in your league, someone's smarter than you. Sorry, that's just how it is. 7 receptions, 45 yards on 9 targets. He gets Philly this week. It's Jacksonville next week, and then Baltimore in week 5. And this is, like I said, this is the banger of the week. Like I'm feeling. Against Philly, especially because it seems like Joe Burrow likes to do the check down, like those. He's been hitting the tight ends a lot. Like he's been targeting them. This is even with Tyler Boyd. I think the tight end is the second favorite on this, the second option on this team. It seems, because definitely it's a Joe Mixon, which hurts my soul. But definitely, yeah, Drew Sample, University of Washington. You heard it here. Banger of the week.
Banger of the week. Thank you. I know that's going to be hard to follow up, Bobby, but who is your banger of the week? Not the banger of the week. Just let us know a good tight end.
Yeah, definitely wouldn't say this is a banger of the week, but I'm looking at Dalton Schultz from Dallas. Blake Jarwin suffered a season-ending injury in Week 1, and so Schultz came in as the starting tight end last week and had 10 targets. He caught 9 of them for 88 yards and a touchdown. I mean, when it comes to fantasy football, over the last 2 years, the Dallas Cowboys offense has been fantasy gold. I mean, obviously you have Zeke, they have a solid O-line. Dak's been putting up insane numbers, and now they have those trio wide receivers with Cooper, Gallup, and Lamb, who I fully expect to all go over 1,000 yards. But a lot of people were high on Blake Jarwin this year, seeing as how Dak's taken another step forward, seeing how Jason Witten is no longer there, and that's opened up some more targets. But Schultz taking that role, he got 10 targets. Again, a lot of fantasy football's opportunity. So if you're looking for a tight end streamer, if you're looking for someone, maybe consider Dalton Schultz, and he plays in a pretty good offense as well.
Another good one to think about. So moving on to the defenses. These can make or break your week, picking up the right defenses. I know last week I've had some good defenses. I've also had some ones that have gotten me negative 11 points. So making sure you grab the right one each week could definitely be big. So, John, who's your defense to start this week?
Defense to start this week, it's tough to say, honestly. They're rostered in like half the leagues, but for some reason, people just don't like them. It's the Bucks, honestly. They didn't do well against New Orleans. So against good, obviously, New Orleans, week 1, you're still figuring stuff out. Week 2 against Carolina, put up 11, a cool 11. So I definitely like them. And another sneaky good pick. I think they'll eventually bounce back, but I'm going to go with the Browns as well. I think the Browns against Washington is a very, very good play this week. Washington, again, another one of those not very good football teams.
The football team.
They're the football team. They're not a good football team. Going to the dog pound, I mean, it's not the same without fans and everything, but they're kind of just a team like you really don't know what you're getting out of Dwayne Haskins. The receivers with Scary Terry, that's about all you got. I think it's a good play this week. I mean, look at the Browns, definitely.
Oh, that's a few good options. So I'm not going to go into kickers because unless you guys have any kicker bangers, then I think it's pretty much just who you got on your team. So I did want to bring this up. We have our buy low, sell high. I think one of you guys has a buy low, one of you guys has a sell high. So let's just start with the sell high. Whoever's got it, let's go.
That's me. My sell high, or my first one is definitely gonna be James Conner. Got a little banged up last week. He's proven that in week 1, he's proven that staying healthy has been definitely an issue for him. But he performed really well last week. Obviously, like Snell came in relief week 1. Wasn't supposed to play, or then Connor wasn't supposed to play. Ended up playing. Had a really solid week 2, 20 points. 16 for 106 and a touchdown. Does see action in the passing game, but again, he just hasn't proven that he can stay healthy. So I think if you have him, just get rid of him. I think you're better off, filling a void because he again. Outside of that first year with when he filled in for Lev Bell, proved that he just has trouble staying healthy. And then my second one, this one pains me because I picked him up last week and I have him on my team. It's going to be Corey Davis. Corey Davis has been the bane of fantasy owners everywhere since he came into the league. He had a highly touted prospect, hasn't really performed to it. Week 1, blew up, 7-101. Nice 17 points in PPR. And then against Jacksonville last week, only 3 receptions on 5 targets. Granted, he's in a more run-heavy team. Did get a touchdown, though, so 12.6 last week. Again, though, that offensive line, they're going to eventually start running the ball more. Henry is just going to take up more than half of those offensive snaps. So if you have Corey Davis and someone is desperate for a receiver, definitely look to sell him before he puts up that nice goose egg that he's definitely going to put up soon.
For sure. Make some really good points. And yeah, Corey Davis is one of those hot pickups too. Like if he's not taken in the league, like there's a lot of people going after him too. A lot of people trying to trade for him, but he is a pretty inconsistent receiver. So after that great performance, this could be a good time to sell. And now on the other side, we're buying low with Bobby Digital. What do we got?
Well, big buy low that comes to mind here, and for me it's clear, is running back Kenyon Drake. A lot of people took Kenyon Drake in the back half of the first round or early second round, so he's most likely a lot of teams' number one RB, or maybe if they went running back, he's their second. Drake, if you look at on the surface, his numbers aren't super impressive. I mean, in week 1, he had only 16 carries for 60 yards. He did get a touchdown to save his day at 12 points. And then week 2, he had 20 for 86 and then 2 catches for 9 yards, so about 10, 11 fantasy points. So on the surface, for someone who you pick that high, you wouldn't think that's the kind of production you're going to want to get. But if you look a little closer, week 1, granted, San Francisco right now isn't super healthy, but in week 1, when they face San Francisco has one of the best fronts in the NFL. And then in week 2, the Washington football team, we think they're not a very good team, but their front 7 is one of the best in the league now, especially with their draft addition, adding Chase Young. And Kenyon Drake is still the lead guy. He's out-touched Chase Edmonds 20-3 last week. And so, and I mean, the Cardinals have one of the best offenses in football. And his next 3 games upcoming is Detroit, Carolina, and the Jets. So he's clearly their guy. They've seen what he could do in the offseason. They obviously traded David Johnson for a reason. And Kyler Murray's been running the ball great, but I don't think he's going to go for a rushing touchdown every single week. So Kenyon Drake, if you can try to somehow get him, maybe a desperate owner, I would definitely buy low on Kenyon Drake. And then another one would be Kenny Golladay. Now, if you're sitting there in your league and you have an owner who has Kenny Golladay, maybe he's 0-2 and he's starting to panic, I would try to pounce at that opportunity. Kenny Golladay was out for the last 2 weeks with a hamstring injury, but reports came out that week 3 he's expected to play. They didn't put him on the 3-week IR, so that means they're expecting him to play as well. I mean, this guy caught almost 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns last year, and that was half the year without his quarterback, Matthew Stafford. And that offense clearly misses him. And I think Golladay is going to do big things. I think he's going to be a top 10 fantasy wide receiver with upside. So if you can somehow take advantage of a desperate owner, I would definitely pounce on Golladay. And one more guy that maybe not necessarily buy low, but you could buy right now while his value still is status quo, is Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper's second in the NFL in targets in that high-powered offense. So he's obviously garnering a lot of targets with the Cowboys, yet he hasn't produced a touchdown yet. And maybe that's not what owners are expecting. Maybe they're wanting him to score more touchdowns, or they think he's not performing up to their standards. But Amari Cooper maybe is somebody you could buy as well.
Speaking of guys who have not scored touchdowns, one of the other big names of talking about trades, and I think this is another guy you might be able to buy while he's pretty low, is Julio Jones. I wanted to get your thoughts on him and maybe another wide receiver that was picked high but hasn't really lived up to his expectation in Allen Robinson. What do you think of these guys?
Yeah, definitely. Allen Robinson is someone, he's trying to play for a contract. He got paid a couple years ago. He got paid by Chicago, and he even said that he was trying to force his way out, but then that came out as not being true. We're still not, jury's still out on that one. Yeah, but Allen Robinson was kind of that receiver that just found a way to perform regardless of who his quarterback was, regardless of his offensive situation. He's just I think he just needs to change the scenery, honestly. It seems that this happens every couple years. Julio, I don't know. It's weird. It seems like he's almost like the third or fourth option now. Like we talked about Gage, we talked Hayden Hurst had a great game last week, finally showing like his potential of being potentially a TE1. But Calvin Ridley is the de facto go-to guy in that offense. Another interesting one that I've been looking at is Adam Thielen. Just that offense without Stephon Diggs seems absolutely lost. Like we thought for sure Thielen was going to pop off, and he just hasn't really been able to put it together. Like I said, Minnesota just looks lost more than anything else. So that's just I mean, like really Thielen. Yeah, I mean, like Thielen, 8 targets the last 2 weeks, but he's only gone for 3 receptions on 8 targets last week against Indianapolis. Like Indianapolis is a good team, but they're not a team that should be shutting down a number 1 option like Thielen.
You make some really good points. Now, for this next section, I do want to answer some of the questions that we have seen across the internet. On our chat, if you'd like to ask any questions, feel free to comment on our Facebook, Twitter, or in the actual Twitch chat itself, and we'll be happy to get to your questions. So, I'm going to pose this first question, start with Bobby. Tim asks, who should I start at RB2? Leonard Fournette, James Conner, or James Robinson? Bobby, the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Did Tim mention the setting of his scoring for his league?
No, so I'm just going to assume PPR.
Yeah. I mean, right now, I think you would have to go still with Connor while he's healthy. I mean, he's going to get all the targets and all the touches. They are playing Houston this week. Baltimore just gashed them on the ground, and then we saw what Kansas City did to them in Week 1. But it's still close because Leonard Fournette is definitely someone whose stock is going up, seeing as how he seemed to take over lead back duties in the second half of that game as well. But I would definitely side with Connor, even though it is relatively close, and that's a great question.
Now, does that change for you if it's a standard scoring?
It still doesn't. I would still go with James Conner. You know he's still going to get the workload when he's in there. He's just at a higher injury risk though.
All right, so John, I'm going to pose you the same question: Fournette, Connor, or James Robinson?
Yeah, I agree with Bobby. Like Fournette, like we're really not sure what we're gonna get. That seemed more so just like what happened with more so just like he benefited from the situation. I I still need to see more out of him. He's in a very favorable offense. They had a favorable matchup against them. They were playing Carolina this week, so it's gonna be interesting to see who they play. But I think you have to go with Connor. He's been the tried and true. He always, when he's healthy, he finds a way just to get targets, get yards. So I definitely agree there.
For sure. And taking a look at that Steelers backfield, a lot of people were really high on Benny Snell after Week 1. James Conner goes down. But Mike Tomlin, I'll tell you, he really likes those to rely on that single running back. So when James Conner is healthy, he's going to get touches. And he's going to get scores. So definitely, I like James Conner in this situation. And it's not just because I have him in almost every league. But going on to the next questions, we got Blake, who asks, keep J.K. Dobbins or grab Devonta Freeman?
Oh, that's you keep J.K. Dobbins because Devonta like keep J.K. Dobbins because in case I've told everyone before the season started he will eventually be the lead back by the end of the season, hands down. You don't want anything to do with that Giants team. Again, like no one, you only wanted Saquon Barkley, and that was it. There's no one else on that team that you want. Maybe Steve Slayton, but you definitely want Dobbins 100%.
Yeah, and Dobbins definitely has the potential in that backfield. You got Mark Ingram, and yeah, he's there. He's good, but J.K. Dobbins, he's young. He's got that upside, and he hasn't gotten the look so far that would really give you confidence. I've actually seen him dropped in a couple of my leagues, and I was quick to snag him up. Because you can't just let a guy like that sit with that kind of potential and that kind of offensive line too, where he really could do some damage. I would definitely lean towards Dobbins, and only grab Devonta Freeman if you have the extra roster slot. I'm still not confident in that Giants backfield at all. Bobby, I don't know if you have any differing opinion.
Absolutely not. I mean, I'm 100% with you guys. J.K. Dobbins has that upside. Devonta Freeman, frankly, really just doesn't. It's clear it's Dobbins.
Yeah, for sure. Now we got a question from Ike asking, full PPR, which receiver has the most long-term value moving forward? Robbie Anderson, Devontae Parker, or Russell Gage?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, if we're talking about long-term value, I guess it would be over the course of this year, but I would still go with Devontae Parker, seeing as how he was a top 10 fantasy receiver down the stretch last year, I'm sorry, and he's been battling through some hamstring injuries, but he's still the number one target in that Dolphins offense. We've seen what he's capable of, and as long as Fitzpatrick remains the starter, and the Dolphins may find themselves in a lot of negative game scripts where they're going to be throwing from behind, as the season goes on, I think Parker will get healthier, and I think he is the long-term call here, but it's really close again because we touched on Russell Gage and how many targets he's been getting and consistently getting going back to last year in that high-powered offense as well. And so it's a close call. I think you could make a case for all three. If it were me personally, I would lean towards Parker, but it's close for me. John?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Robbie Anderson has proven to be really solid, honestly. Throughout the beginning of the season, new face or old face in a new place. He's definitely, 10 targets this past week, 8 targets the week before, 1 touchdown. I think he's if not leading, he's the top 3 yardage at the moment for receivers. Definitely a favorite target of Teddy Bridgewater. And again, another negative game script that they'll be having. Like they're gonna be trailing a lot of games, and especially without McCaffrey, they're gonna need a playmaker, and it might be Robbie Anderson, honestly, because they're gonna be losing, and they're gonna have to throw, and he's definitely shown like he's got that home run potential.
Yeah, that's a good point. And this next question I have, and this one 2 weeks ago, I would have thought this was a joke, but after the first couple of weeks, I think the gap isn't so far apart. So we have PI asking, should I trade James Robinson for Allen Robinson? Half point PPR.
You can go ahead on that one, John, if you want.
James Robinson for Allen Robinson. That's that's just so loaded. Like I don't even know. Like Robinson he's proven to be like he's 100% the lead back, but I mean like there's always the Chris Thompson factor and just Jacksonville being Jacksonville. Again, they've proven to not to be a terrible team this year, so we'll see what happens. But I think you still got to stick it out with Allen Robinson, just because he could very well get traded. If he gets traded to an offense and he fits in immediately, like that's a league winner right there.
Yeah, for sure. Bobby, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. James Robinson has been quietly very impressive. He has 32 carries so far. He's 164 yards. He's averaging 5.1 yards per carry. He's clearly their lead guy. But again, like John said, it's Jacksonville. And Allen Robinson, I mean, we know what he's capable of. Like he said, he can be traded, and that would definitely be a potential league winner. Allen Robinson's the more proven guy. Even in half PPR, he's a little more valuable as well. So the gap is definitely narrowed. I mean, if you like K-Mac, you were saying if you asked this question 2 weeks ago, you would have thought we were crazy. So I can see where the question would come up, but I would still rather have Allen Robinson in that deal.
Yeah, I agree. As someone who owns Allen Robinson in every single league, waiting for him to have that breakout game and hoping that he gets traded to an offense. I actually do own Jane Robinson in a couple of leagues also.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely like those Robinsons. Just wanting to see more out of Allen Robinson, but we'll see. I'm hoping his time will come, figuring Chicago and maybe Mitch Trubisky will get injured and Nick Foles will throw the ball. But we'll have to wait and see about that. So, going on to the next question. Craig asks, would you rather start Antonio Gibson, James Robinson, or Deontay Johnson this week? Full PPR.
You can take this one first.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's between James Robinson and Deontay Johnson. I would side with Deontay Johnson. I've been very impressed with him. He's actually the Steelers' leader in targets. He got 10 targets last week. Now that we know that Ben's healthy, I mean, Deontay Johnson was a guy last year who really kind of came on the scene, and he was really getting talked up in camp, and he's had another year now under his belt. He seems to be, target-wise, taking over the number one spot in Pittsburgh now. We don't know if that's going to last or not, but Deontay Johnson has all the upside in the world, and I love his matchup against Houston, especially in a full PPR. I would side with Deontay Johnson here. I'm really liking him this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Sorry. No, I was just gonna say, like, I definitely agree with him. Like, James Robinson, like, has proven that he might be here to stay. But Deontay Johnson, like, we saw his workload last year. It increased as the season went on. And he's outperformed Juju, and it hasn't even been close. So I think Deontay Johnson, like this week against Houston, great matchup as well. But again, just going down, like the rest of the season, like he's definitely looking forward to having a great season.
Yeah, and Deontay Johnson, if you're listening to this podcast by any chance, I hate you. You gave me the loss last week. I did not expect you to do all that, so I'm not picking you up anytime soon just because this is personal. So, moving on. Steven asks, would you continue to start Tom Brady or go to the waiver wire for Tannehill or Minshew? And Bobby, we'll open it up with you.
Well, assuming that Brady's your only quarterback on your roster, that's a tough one. I would take a serious look at Ryan Tannehill. I may pull the trigger on that move. Going back to last year, towards down the stretch when Tannehill took over, he was a top 10 fantasy QB. And then we see him coming off this 4-touchdown performance. He was efficient against in his first game against Denver. He had that little bit of that rushing upside. And then you look at Tom Brady. I mean, he has weapons in Godwin and Evans. But I really the Bucks have a good defense, and I think a better defense than people expect. Like John was talking about them being an option this week, and I think the Bucks want to run the ball too, and I think just Brady's not that kind of guy who's going to air it out like that anymore. And for fantasy, that can cap upside. So I would go with Ryan Tannehill. I guess I'm assuming rest of the season, or if he wants to do that this week or moving forward, I would go with Ryan Tannehill. I really like him this year over Tom Brady rest of season, but it is close. I don't believe it's anything too much of a gap between them. But what do you think about that one, John? I'd like to hear your opinion on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bruce Arians' offense is usually pretty well balanced. It usually favors more of the quarterback, but Brady he's not that, like you said, he's just not that air out quarterback anymore. Even his stat lines, like he's been 23 of 26 was the first week, 23 of 25 last week. He's hovering around the 230 yard mark. The turnovers have been an issue. 2 interceptions against New Orleans, 1 interception, 1 fumble against Carolina. And again, Carolina's not a good defense, especially playing at home. So I think that definitely opened a way for Fournette and maybe even Ronald Jones in the future. But I definitely think you look at the waiver wire, because Brady's just he's not that top 5, top 10 quarterback anymore. He's not a QB1 anymore. Definitely a good streamer here and there. But like you said, Tannehill's an option. Gardner Minshew's an option. Again, even if Justin Herbert's available or Joe Burrow, definitely grab one of those over him, because those guys are going to see lots of action.
Yeah, it's strange. All this happening with Tom Brady having arguably the best weapons he's had in years, and seeing his age finally come in, or it might be the offense, but either way, he's just not the Tom Brady of old who's going to give you consistent high fantasy numbers. That being said, Tannehill, Minshew, 2 guys who are definitely trending upwards and definitely both clicking into their offenses. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with these guys. Now, moving on to our last question of the night. We have Clayton, who asks, who wins this trade, PPR? Team 1 gets James Robinson and Michael Gallup. Team 2 gets Terry McLaurin.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so I guess you have an opinion on that, John.
Yeah, definitely Team 1, 100%. Don't get me wrong, I love Terry McLaurin. Like he was one of my. You could ask Robert. I picked him up early on last year, and he definitely helped me out. I finished top 3 in our league. He definitely helped me out towards the middle end of the last season. Did have a couple duds, but yeah, give me Team 1. Michael Gallup, showing he can perform well. Even without Blake Jarwin, like I think they're definitely going to go more 13 personnel. We're going to see more three receiver sets almost exclusively, I would assume, from Dallas. So I think those receivers, all 3 are going to pop off. And we've already expressed our love for James Robinson this throughout this whole podcast. So why change now?
Yeah, Bobby, what are your thoughts on this trade?
Yeah, I'm with you there, John. I think if Terry McLaurin was on a different team, maybe with a better quarterback, because he's just such a far and away, such a great talent, I would maybe consider it. I think his numbers would be a lot better. But yeah, I mean, again, Michael Gallup, he maybe gone off to a little bit of a slower start when you expected. But again, he's going to be projected to be over 1,000 yards. And James Robinson's, whether we like it or not, he's the feature back in Jacksonville. So I think not quite enough there. And I would definitely side with Team 1.
So, the thing, I've also grabbed Terry McLaurin. He's another guy I have in pretty much every league. That being said, I'm not 100% sure if I'd take that trade if I was offered James Robinson and Michael Gallup. I don't know. I still really like Terry McLaurin's ceiling. I think out of the 3 of them, he's definitely the one with the highest ceiling. But whether James Robinson and Michael Gallup is enough to get me to trade away Terry McLaurin personally, I don't know. So that being said, that wraps up for the questions that we have. I want to move on. We have a game this Thursday night before we'll talk to you next. And don't have time to go into a full preview of this, but we do have the Dolphins at the Jaguars. Definitely some fantasy names in there that are worth mentioning. I know we've already talked plenty about James Robinson, but I want to ask each of you to pick one breakout performer for this particular game. One person who you see exceeding the ESPN value that they're projected to get and just being that guy who's going to break out and go above projections. And we are going to start with you, Bobby.
Yeah, I am looking at DJ Chark. ESPN has him projected for 11.5 fantasy points. Chark was a guy that went over 1,000 yards last year and was kind of had his breakout season. And a lot of people, including myself, drafted him in the 4th round, hoping to get back wide receiver 2 value with wide receiver 1 upside. Gotten off to somewhat of a slow start. He's only seen 3 and 4 targets in each of the last 2 games, respectively, and that's not even the most on his own team. So it's kind of gotten off to a slow start, but I think without Byron Jones, the Dolphins' top free agent CB, and Chark being, I believe, the best skilled wide receiver on that team, I think that he could easily outperform that 11.5 fantasy points. I like Chark. I like Chark big on Thursday night.
That's good. And what about you, John? Who do you have?
So mine is it was a toss-up, honestly. I had one from Jacksonville, one from Miami, but I think I'm definitely leaning more to Preston Williams, honestly, number 2 in Miami. Parker a little banged up. We're not sure if we're going to get him on a short week, but also if he is healthy, he's going to see the Henderson shadow. So that'll definitely free up Preston Williams. He's definitely a home run threat, proven to be really solid enough with his hands. Seen some good targets throughout this season as well. I like him, but again, I also do like Keelan Cole. I mentioned him earlier. Seen a ton of targets as well. But I'd probably have to go with as my go-to, bet my money on it, gun to my head. Give me Preston Williams on to beat that 10.5 that ESPN projects him at.
And one guy who I personally like, and I wouldn't normally pick him week to week, but I do definitely like his matchup this week. ESPN projects him at 16.2 points, but I really like Ryan Fitzpatrick this week going against that Jaguars defense. You look at last week, Ryan Tannehill put up great numbers against him, 239 yards and 4 touchdowns. The week before, Phillip Rivers even put up 363 yards and a touchdown. And Ryan Fitzpatrick has the potential. He's definitely a boom or bust kind of quarterback, not somebody who I'd like in my roster week to week. But for this matchup in particular, I like his chances and the possibilities of putting up a monster game.
Yeah, no, I definitely do agree there. Like I said, Jacksonville seems to be they give up a lot of points. Definitely, the defense has trouble getting off the field, and Fitzpatrick has proven that at times, like he plays well. I mean, he had a full season with the Jets that he was one of the best quarterbacks in Jets history, and then even then, like last year, he had a couple of games where he's absolutely popped off.
Yeah. So besides that, those are our breakout performers for the day. Any other players that you guys seeing making an impact in this Thursday night game? Bobby, we'll start with you.
I mean, we talked about Myles Gaskin. It's not a very sexy pick, but he is seeing the bulk of Miami's touches, and he is getting receiving receptions as well. So they seem to like him. I mean, it was a surprise because we thought it would be Jordan Howard, which he is on the goal line, but then we thought them acquiring Matt Breida from San Francisco would be a big part of the offense. But if you're looking for maybe some a little under the radar, not quite sexy, maybe you're really desperate at running back, maybe you miss out on some of the other waiver running backs we talked about, Myles Gaskin might not be the worst play in the world. So I would say maybe he'll fall into the end zone, maybe he'll catch a 20-yard pass and get in the end zone and save his day. So Myles Gaskin would be someone else I might have my eye on Thursday night.
Okay, cool. And I know we've mentioned his name plenty of times, but I'm going to say it one last time. James Robinson. How do you think he's going to fare against this Miami Dolphins defense, John?
James Robinson against Miami, I'm definitely liking him. I'd probably say like his workload has been very, very consistent. 16 carries in both games. I think he goes about that. We'll go 16 carries, 85 yards, finds pay dirt, and throw 2 receptions in there for me.
Okay, really specific numbers. We're going to see if that happens. All right, so that about wraps it up for tonight's podcast. For everybody listening in, I really appreciate you watching us. Thank you for putting up with the technical difficulties we had early, but we were happy to get on the air at 9 o'clock Eastern exactly. So I want you to stay tuned and listen in this Sunday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern. We are going to have our last-minute fantasy scramble. That's right. We are going to be here answering all of your fantasy questions. Should I start them? Should I sit them? Any kind of last-minute adjustments that you're going to need before the game. We're going to take you an hour right up until game time, and we're going to be here giving you the latest news, the latest updates, and all the answers you need. So thank you for listening. I'm Kevin McCartney alongside Bobby Digital Janas and John Viveros. Thank you and have a good night.
See you guys.